This lesson in manuscript form was issued to members of the Brotherhood of Light in August 1916, and since that date has constantly been used in the various chapters of the fraternity. I have now rewritten it in the endeavor to present the subject in a manner more easily comprehended and more easily remembered. The Doctrine of Signatures. The English word signature is derived from the Latin signare, meaning to sign. A signature, therefore, is a mark of identification. The Latin docere, from which the word doctrine is derived, signifies to teach. In occult science, the doctrine of signatures relates to that which is taught about the marks placed upon all things by stellar influences. It is of these stellar marks of identification that I shall have considerable to say. Turning for the moment from the stars, we find that the owner of livestock places a brand upon his cattle by which his property may be recognized. The manufacturer, that its source may be recognized, stamps a trademark upon his product. The public official places his seal upon legal documents to denote their importance and character, and correspondents sign their letters with their autographs that no doubt may arise in the mind of the recipient as to whom the sender may be. These are circumstances commonly recognized. But less commonly recognized is the fact that all things external have upon them the stamp of their origin in the cause world, and that this relates them as definite kin to certain other things. It is not surprising that one may fail to recognize the seal of the Emperor of China or the signature of an Indian prince. Yet to one familiar with the language, history, and customs of China and India, such signs are evidence enough upon which to establish the source of missive and determine the prestige of its sender. Likewise, the man in the street is ignorant of the signs by which the planets and zodiacal signs mark their progeny. But those familiar with celestial language recognize these marks and, in addition to deducing their common origin, quickly perceive the relationship of anything so sealed with other objects bearing the same impress. Now, to facilitate the study of the doctrine of signatures, let us turn to that much misunderstood tradition of the Jewish Kabbalah. Not that the Jews knew more about occult doctrine than other ancient peoples, perhaps much less than some, but because their contact with the priesthood of both Egypt and Chaldea, they became familiar with the mysteries that in these countries were taught only to initiates. Moses, the great lawgiver of the Jews, according to the most authentic tradition, was saved from the waters of the Nile by Thermuthis, the daughter of Pharaoh Amenephis. He was raised by the Magi, or ancient Masons, and drew from their secret teachings the religious, political, and social ideas which were the basis of the legislation of the Hebrews after their exodus from Egypt. That Moses received initiation from the Egyptian priesthood is made apparent in the Bible, Acts chapter 7, verse 22, quote, "And Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, and was mighty in words and in deeds," end quote. Thus did the laws and rites of ancient Masonry pass in great measure into the theocracy which Moses founded. The religious laws of antiquity in general, of Egypt and Chaldea in particular, forbade that any part of the mysteries should be committed to writing. These things, nevertheless, were evidently revealed by Moses to the Hebrew elders and handed down by them until the second destruction of the temple, because at that time it was placed in writing as the Kabbalah. A great deal of this traditional wisdom was also, from time to time before the advent of the written Kabbalah, but during and subsequent to the Babylonian captivity, concealed in the Bible. In these two Jewish books, the Bible and the Kabbalah, that all may read who can penetrate the veil, we have the esoteric doctrine of Chaldea and Egypt. The Kabbalah describes creation as having been accomplished by means of 10 emanations. Earlier than this, all was without form and void. Before proceeding with this Kabbalistical explanation, it is advisable to explain that universally considered there is but one principle, but one law, but one truth, and but one agent. This is expressed beautifully by the fourfold sphinx. It has the paws of a lion, symbolizing the one principle, energy, the wings of an eagle expressing the one law, sex, the body of a bull signifying the one agent, form, and the head of a man typifying the one truth, reality. The Kabbalists call the state prior to creation the En Sof Or, meaning the limitless light. It represents a condition when nothing existed but the all-pervading non-atomic spirit, potential but unmanifest. Then comes emanation, creation. The first of these emanations is Keter, or crown. It is merely motion, vibration. Coincident with this, a partnership is formed. The non-atomic, diffusive spirit is polarized into more active portions and less active portions. These are related to each other as positive and negative. Deity is no longer homogeneous, but has become male and female. Here we have the Godhead of the Kabbalists, similar to the Godhead of the world's most popular religions. The Kabbalah calls it Keter, Hokmah, and Bina, rendered crown, wisdom, and love, or in terms of Hermetic philosophy, life, light, and love. The God who is a trinity, yet is one. This triune Godhead, according to the ancient teaching, is the spiritual sun of the universe from which flows the so-called solar ray. The latter contains within it the potency of all that is, all that has been, and all that ever possibly can be. It is not to be confused with the rays of the physical sun, for it is spiritual and mental as well as physical. The more slowly moving portions of this ray, the negative portions, interact with one another to produce the grosser forms of substance, such as the ether of space that cushions the sun and planets, and those still less active forms with which we are familiar as matter. The more active moving portions of the ray, the more active portions of this universal energy, we term spirit. This positive, finer, more subtle energy inheres in matter of every grade and order as the instigator of life and motion. From the first trinity of the Sephiroth, known to Western students as life, light, and love, are evolved 7 more specialized emanations which constitute the 7 active principles of nature. This is brought about through the solar ray being refracted from 7 subcenters around the spiritual sun. These form the 7 states of angelic life from which issue all the life entities of our universe. Each of these 7 states corresponds to one of the 7 planets. The Kabbalists hold that each is presided over by an archangel, or as modern astrologers state it, each represents a family of planetary life. Thus, the planetary family corresponding to the sun is said to be ruled over by the archangel Michael, that corresponding to Mercury by Raphael, that corresponding to Venus by Anael, that corresponding to the moon by Gabriel, that corresponding to Saturn by Cassiel, that corresponding to Jupiter by Zachariah, and the family corresponding to Mars by Samael. Now the spiritual potencies that constitute the egos of all things never were created, never had a beginning, never can be destroyed. The law of conservation of energy forbids such beginning and such destruction. But they did have a point of differentiation from which they departed on their present cyclic journey, and this point of departure was within the spiritual vortex of one of the planetary families. Each ego, therefore, partakes of the attributes of one of the 7 planetary families, and this may be said to constitute the character of its genius. That is, the internal nature or individuality of each human being corresponds to one of the planets, and this correspondence is never entirely effaced during the whole stretch of time that constitutes the soul cycle of experience. The 2 souls, which embrace all the states of consciousness of the ego, partake of the planetary quality of the ego. Not only so, but they carry with them the impress of their birthplace, or environment in which differentiation took place. Thus the universe is divided into 4 states of life: fire, air, water, and earth. And each soul proceeds from one of these 4 states, which are represented by the fiery, airy, watery, and earthy signs of the zodiac. It is this affinity for a certain state of life that shapes the general trend of the soul's impulses. Furthermore, each state of life has 3 degrees of emanation. Thus Aries constitutes the first, Leo the second, and Sagittarius the 3rd degree of emanation of the fiery state of life. Gemini is the first, Libra the second, and Aquarius the 3rd degree of emanation of the airy state of life. Cancer is the first, Scorpio the second, and Pisces the 3rd degree of emanation of the watery state of life. Taurus is the first, Virgo the second, and Capricorn the 3rd degree of emanation of the earthy state of life. Each soul, therefore, by reason of the environment in which the differentiation of the ego occurred, also may be said to belong to a certain degree of emanation. The motives and impulses of a soul belonging to the fiery state of life are found to be shaped largely by inspiration and enthusiasm. Those belonging to the airy state of life by intellect and aspiration. those belonging to the watery state of life by sensation and emotion, and those belonging to the earthy state of life by application and practicality. If at the same time a soul belongs to the first degree of emanation, it will act from its own feelings, ideas, and inward yearnings. If the individual belongs to the second degree of emanation, they will act to a greater extent from the motive of what other people think and advise. And if one belongs to the third degree of emanation, their acts will be very largely determined by the ideas and admonitions received from others. It is now apparent that the doctrine of signatures revolves around three chief factors, which are termed character of genius, state of life, and degree of emanation. By the use of such terms, we are able to designate the parentage and birthplace of a soul, just as we are able by other more familiar terms to designate a person's physical parentage and place of birth. When accurately determined, the ancestry and place of birth of an individual gives considerable information as to what may be expected of the individual. Likewise, the planetary family and celestial environment of a soul's origin is some index to its abilities and possibilities. That is, while not complete data upon which to predict the actions of an individual or a soul, they have a real value as determining factors. They are not complete data because after birth, each individual and each soul undergoes a series of experiences. These greatly modify the qualities with which the individual or the soul is born. Subsequent environment is constantly changing the character, constantly adding new factors, constantly giving new viewpoints. Ancestry and birth environment is not all to be considered in reference to character. Neither is later environment and experience to be considered all. Both the later environment and the ancestry together with the birth environment must be considered. The birth chart reveals the result of the interaction of both these factors up to the time the soul is born in human form. The doctrine of signatures, therefore, considers the influence of ancestry, birth environment, and subsequent experiences upon the soul, as revealed by the birth chart and as indicating both character and fortune. After its differentiation, the soul monad in its cyclic journey passes through innumerable states and phases of existence, adding new characteristics and qualities, as a traveler acquires new customs and idioms of speech without effacing the marks of birthplace and parentage. One traveler, however, is attracted to certain customs while being repelled by usages that are attractive to other travelers. Likewise, each soul on its long journey is attracted more strongly to certain forms of life and finds more complete expression through them, while souls of different origin are attracted strongly to and find more complete expression through other life forms. The soul belonging to the planetary family of Mars, for instance, whenever it finds itself in a Saturnian environment, expresses itself only with greatest difficulty, and the Venusian soul feels little affinity for the regal surroundings and majestic qualities of the sun.